Welcome to Legal Lines. My name is Tom O'Shea, and I am the host of this program brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation. Tonight's topic is the Court Self-Help Center, and my guest is Megan Dietz, who is the director of the Court Self-Help Center. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you.
And the first question's an obvious one. What is the Court Self-Help Center?
The Court Self-Help Center is a place where people who don't have attorneys can come to get some help and some guidance filing with the forms that they need to file in certain actions. We originally envisioned this program as being come and have forms that were designed by attorneys that were sort of more standardized, I guess, to help with the efficiency of the court system, to make sure that it's a little more fair for all parties. And I think we realized quickly that our center has to grow and evolve to be not just for self-represented litigants, but also a resource for the community. So all kinds of questions can get answered there, but our focus is really on providing a little bit of help for people who either can't afford an attorney or choose not to have one.
So if somebody, for example, wanted to file a child custody case and they found themselves in a situation where they could not afford an attorney or they did not wish to pay legal fees, right, they could go to the Self-Help Center and find out what they needed to do. Exactly,
and there are limits on that. We have forms available for them to look at, depending on what kind of, in this instance, custody matter, their custody petition they're trying to file. The help that we provide them is limited. We don't provide any legal advice. We will not help them fill out the forms.
Okay.
But if they can...
Let's start with that and then make that clear. You cannot give them legal advice.
No.
You're basically directing them to the forms that the court will accept for a certain type of action to be filed.
Exactly.
And to make it clear, you are not an attorney, correct?
No.
Okay, but nevertheless, you have enough legal knowledge to know what forms are necessary, et cetera, and direct people to the correct forms that they would need.
Right. I think that helps because the people who come in aren't then confused that I am their attorney or that they got legal advice.
Now let me just start out with this too. This center is new to York County.
Yes.
So we are really just starting this program. And what's the reason why this program is being started?
Part of that is, I think that people have the right to represent themselves if they need to, but I think more pressing is the fact that the number of self-represented litigants has increased drastically over the last several years, in part because of, I would guess, economy, but people can't afford attorneys, and a lot of people don't qualify for legal help. If you can't afford an attorney, if you don't have that emergency fund set aside when you do have something legal to take care of, this is a place where you can come and hopefully have something that will help you navigate the judicial system.
Okay, so this program, to begin with, it's being sponsored by the York County Bar Foundation.
Yes.
And with a grant from the York County Bar Foundation.
Yes.
So lawyers who support the York County Bar Foundation in reality are paying for a service to be provided to people who have decided to go through the court system without an attorney.
That's right.
It almost sounds counterproductive for attorneys to do that, but there is a good reason why it's being done. And can you explain that?
I can. It actually makes everything work more efficiently. And at the bottom of it, it's more fair for everyone involved. We get a lot of people who might come in representing themselves, and they don't know what to file. They don't even know what they need to ask the court for or what they need to do in court. So they will write, sometimes handwritten, a 5-page, 10-page, basically an essay, trying to just pour out their hearts or explain what they need done or what happened to them or what's been done to them. And when they show up for the court hearing or when they show up for the proceeding, it's the wrong thing. Then nothing in that is the information that the judge needs. It's nothing that the other parties need. So it does, I hate to say waste time, but it does. It wastes everyone's time if that has to then be rescheduled so that they can go back and try again to get the right things on.
Okay. Now, this process, this whole idea of a court self-help center, is that something that is new to the legal field?
No, actually, while we're one of the first in Pennsylvania, there are several other counties that have them, but we're some of the first. It is a nationwide growing phenomena. I think that most states have court self-help centers. Most states have lots of resources for self-represented litigants.
So this is relatively new to Pennsylvania. Other states have had it for a while?
Yes.
And Pennsylvania has now decided to take this approach, but it's on a county-by-county basis?
Yes.
And York County is one of the first counties?
We are. There are several others. I know Lancaster, Dauphin, Berks, they have self-help centers. I know Allegheny County is soon to have a self-help center opened, and we felt that York should be also participating.
So this is a service that eventually we hope most counties will have. But as you were pointing out, the need for this is that many people who want to file some type of court action don't necessarily know what they need to prepare.
Right.
And basically, if we take the custody case, for example, they might file a document with the court that is many, many paragraphs talking about everything from the day the child was born, talking about who did what when, but forgetting to necessarily state what they are asking for as so far as a custody order is concerned, or forgetting that the court rules, or not knowing that the court rules require that there be a certification that says that neither party has a criminal record, or if they do have a criminal record, the different procedures they have to go through.
Right. And our packets include a checklist of the things that they need to file, so that you have the actual motion, but you also have the way to serve the other party to let them know that they're being sued for custody. You have the verification of criminal or abuse history that you were talking about. That's a relatively new rule that needs to be signed and verified and filed with every petition. Every step that they need to do is in there. We also hope that beyond just the packets, we hope that we can provide some level of knowledge of how they need to prepare for court.
All right. Now you're mentioning the word packets. What are you talking about when you say a packet?
The packet is, we don't just hand someone an order, says, here's the official order that says that you want custody. Instead, they're very detailed but simple instructions, taking you step by step through everything you need to do in order to go about filing for example, custody. These were designed by some attorneys in York who were helping us really closely work with these to make these forms, the instructions, the packets, the checklists.
Now, we're talking about child custody as one of the areas that you're going to deal with, and there's a reason for that.
Yes.
Can you explain the reason for that?
I think from what I've learned, there is actually a very close community of court self-help centers. They stay in touch, network. What I've heard from them, what I've heard from the county itself, from a lot of the row offices, from attorneys around the county, custody is going to be probably our biggest area that we're expecting people to come represent themselves and looking for help and guidance.
And in fact, history will show that in the York County court system, a large number of the custody cases have people showing up without attorneys. Either they're filing on their own or they're responding to a custody case on their own. Sometimes because they cannot afford an attorney, sometimes because they do not wish to pay for an attorney. But whatever the reason might be, there's a high volume of people going to custody court without attorneys.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, a lot of times they show up at a court proceeding, everything's been scheduled, the court time is blocked, and they didn't complete the correct paperwork, and the court can't proceed with the case.
Right.
And everybody then gets thrown back into a delay in order for the correct paperwork to be filed, and then that delays the case for those parties, puts that child in a delay, the child who's the subject of the custody case, and also that court time could have been used by another case which was delayed because of a backlog caused by cases that had to be rescheduled several times.
Absolutely.
So I see the problem, and I see why you're part of the solution, okay? So, but let's focus then on if I'm going to take us through the steps. If I am somebody who wants to file, and I'll use the example, the child custody case, and I don't have an attorney and do not wish to hire an attorney, I could go to the self-help center, correct?
Right.
And you mentioned packets. So I show up and I say, I want to file a child custody action. Do you just hand me some document and say, leave?
No. The idea is we don't want to send anyone with papers that aren't suited for that custody case or for that matter. And again, that would just slow down the efficiency. It wouldn't help that much. We have packets. They're put in binders. I've put them all in binders, and we would like the person who's asking for an order or for a motion to peruse it. Sit down, take a look at it, read through it. If this 40-page document with instructions, with different motions, with different steps to take, is difficult for you to get through, you might consider consulting an attorney, because we want to emphasize that it's not easy to represent yourself. We will then, if they decide they still want to go forward and buy the packet, we'll sell it to them for the cost of the printing it costs the county. In terms of when they walk in and tell me they want custody, we do have to discern what kind of custody matter it is. Now, again, I can't tell someone what form to take. That could be crossing lines of giving legal advice. So they have to explain their situation, and based on what they tell me, I say, I believe this is the form you want. You want to modify an existing custody order. Here, take a look at our binder. Gives you some instructions and some steps you'll have to take.
And that's a good example. I mean, there would be a different procedure to take if you wanted to modify an existing custody order as opposed to asking the court for an original custody order.
Correct.
There are also different procedures to take if you have a custody order and the other party is not following the custody order,
right,
to enforce the custody order. And each of those would have different procedures and different forms, right, that would need to be filed. So let's say I go to the self-help center. I'm directed to the forms that I should probably use. Are there then instructions that tell me what to file, when to file it, and how to serve it?
Right. The instructions are pretty good about how to fill out the caption, what you need for your name, then what to do with that once it's filled out. You file it at the prothonotary, which conveniently is right across the hall. We're on the first floor.
Okay, I forgot to mention that.
We'll be on the first floor.
Where is the office located, the self-help center?
Right inside the entrance of the judicial center. As you go through security, we're on the left.
Okay, so right on the first floor, on the left after you pass through the security.
Yes. So very conveniently located. Then you would go file with prothonotary.
And they're directly across the hall, exactly, on the right of the security.
And because we're dealing with civil matters only.
That's a good thing to point out. Nothing that you do deals with criminal matters.
Right, right.
So you're purely dealing with civil lawsuits.
Yes.
Okay, so, and just to, as I understand it, in criminal cases, there's an automatic right to counsel if you cannot afford one.
Yes.
In a civil case, there is not.
Right.
So this is a service that's being provided for people who cannot afford attorneys, whereas in the criminal situation, if someone cannot afford an attorney, the state or the county needs to provide them with counsel to represent them.
Right. And I think that sometimes the misunderstanding there is that civil matters aren't as important. And especially as we keep using the example of custody, they are. And it's very difficult to represent yourself. So if we can provide some guidance, some help.
I'm going to need to cut you off right here for our break. Okay. And we'll be back in a few minutes. And this is Legal Lines. Welcome back to Legal Lines. Today's program is about the York County Court Self-Help Center, and my guest is the director of the center, Megan Dietz. And Megan, one of the things we forgot to point out in the first segment is that the center is just opening on October 23rd, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
Next one.
So it isn't open yet, and you're getting all ready for this.
Yes.
Okay. And what we were talking about before is the self-help center is basically a place where people who do not have attorneys and do not wish to hire attorneys for either financial reasons or other reasons can go to learn about how to file a lawsuit on their own. Right. And you pointed out also that the greatest need for these types of cases is in the area of child custody. Yes. There are other types of cases that your center will help with, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. But before the break, we were talking about the process. Right. Someone comes to the center and gets the forms that they would need in order to initiate a custody filing. And we talked about that depending, it could be a modification of an existing order, it could be a new order, it could be enforcement of an existing order, depending upon what they want to do. But once they are able to use these forms, we were talking about how they file them. And you indicated that that's at the prothonotari's office. Right. And the prothonotari's office is the office at the courthouse that handles all civil matters. Yes. And as you pointed out in the first half, the self-help center is only dealing with civil cases, not criminal cases. Right. So someone goes to the prothonotari's office after they fill out the correct paperwork, and they have to file it. Is there a filing fee? Yes. Every filing has a fee of some sort. All right. Now, this isn't a lawyer's fee. This is a fee that the court charges to process the papers. Correct. And to some people's surprise, these fees may not be inexpensive. No, they can get pretty expensive. Okay. And for the types of forms we have, they can range for very small, but a lot of them are $150 to well over $300 to file. So in a child custody case where you're asking the court to appoint a custody conciliator, that would be a case that would be approximately $300. Am I correct? Right. So, I mean, the person would still have to pay the filing fee. Right. Now, for people who are truly indigent and cannot afford the filing fee, is there a process that they can go through? There is, and we have a form for that. There are two ways people can go to try to get help. They can try to qualify for legal aid. If they don't meet that requirement, then they can try another way, which would be a form called Informa Pauperis, which is what they would apply for. They would file this form with the prothonotary, and again, they would have to pay the fee to file it. I'm actually not sure what the fee is for that. But they file it, and then based on other determinations, they decide if they can waive filing fees for future filings. Okay, and we can't say the exact amount of income that's required or assets in order to qualify because it's a combination of income and assets, and there's a formula that the court generally uses to determine whether someone would qualify. Right. But as I understand it, it's based upon the poverty line, and you are allowed to have very few assets to qualify. Right. So many people legitimately cannot afford an attorney even though they would not qualify for Informa Pauperis. Right. We've found actually in a lot of the things that I've learned that it's not just the very destitute people who can't afford attorneys at this point, that a lot of the middle class has now realized that attorneys are very expensive, not necessarily on their own, but when you look at the filing fees, if you don't qualify for legal aid or if you don't qualify for Informa Pauperis, you file the fee, the filing fee you have to pay. You also have to pay later on for other things along the way in the custody things. There are conciliator fees, there are parenting classes. If you want to have evaluations done, those are fees that the parents would have to pay. So the fees really add up, and even if you're not paying for an attorney, you could end up paying a lot of money. Right. So to go back to our process. Right. You filled out the correct paperwork. The packet gives you instructions as to where to file it at the prothonotari's office. They will charge you the filing fee. And then you are directed to the court administrator's office for scheduling purposes. Right. The court administrator will help you then they will determine the scheduling process. You'll take your filed forms, copies of them clocked in up to them, and then they would sort of assign to a judge and schedule the next step. Again, all of these things are provided in the packet. We give a nice overview of the path your custody form, right, for instance, would take. The next step is service. And I think that's a problem where the court has to reschedule these cases frequently, is because someone files the right paperwork, but they don't do formal service upon the other party.
Right.
Service basically means the other party is given a copy of it and they have notice of the proceeding.
Correct, that they're informed that there is a legal proceeding and that they are involved.
And there are certain rules with respect to service. I can't just show up at court and say, well, I served this, I gave a copy to the opposing party, so therefore we should proceed.
Right, or I gave him a copy this morning.
Right.
We have to have proper notice. Then there has to be some level of proof that you did indeed service this person with the forms.
And what you provide these people is all the rules and all the requirements for how to do proper service. So when they show up for court with the proper forms, with the proper service, the court can actually begin to deal with the merits of the case.
Right. It's not to say that everything will go swimmingly and that everything is going to be easier, but again, there are all these rules of civil procedure that your normal person who's representing himself is not going to be familiar with. But they are required to. If you are going to represent yourself, you're required to be held to the same standards and the same rules as an attorney would. So this way you are given the form of how to serve them. There are a couple of options by mail or in person, but they have to sign the affidavit that they've received it. So you get the little steps that you might miss or that you might not think about. Those are all included, so we're not missing steps.
And some of these little steps are critical to proceeding with your case. For example, service is almost mandated by the Constitution. You can't proceed without due process, without notifying the other side properly.
Right.
So it might sound like a little step, but when someone shows up at court and say, well, I called them on the phone and I told them I was doing this and they were supposed to show up, and they don't show up, the judge has no choice but to say, you have to serve them the right way before you can proceed.
They need to be able to defend themselves, make their own case. So
you're giving them all the information as to how to handle the procedure. Are you also giving information with basic knowledge of the law?
Well, in a couple of ways that we can do that. I have on hand the York County Rules of Civil Procedure for them to peruse if they come in. We're also trying to make it a little more accessible, I think. So in custody, for instance, there are several factors a judge considers when deciding who gets custody, and I think there are 16.
The legislature has mandated that a court has got to consider 16 factors in awarding custody.
Right.
And somebody who comes into court might not know that if they don't have an attorney.
Absolutely, and they might not realize that the 17th one they're thinking of is not relevant or important in this proceeding, but we want them to be familiar with it. We're not telling them how to present their case or what they need to do, but simply that these are the things that are going to be considered. So you might want to think about them. You might want to be prepared. Again, if you do go to trial, you'll have witnesses. You want to think about why you would call a witness and would it fit into one of these categories.
So you're not giving them the legal advice on how to proceed with their case. On the other hand, you're saying if you're going to court, the court has to consider these 16 factors. Here's what they are.
Right.
And you better be prepared to address them.
Right.
With your own testimony, with testimony of witnesses or exhibits that you might be able to use.
Absolutely. Giving them the knowledge that those 16 things exist and what they are is not giving legal advice. It seems only fair that they would have that same information, and it's not something that one would just know. And
we focused a great deal of this on custody law, mainly because that's where the greatest need is. And one of the things that I think is important, that in custody law, the court has a duty to go beyond what the parties present if the court believes there isn't enough there that's being presented, because we're dealing with the welfare of a child.
Right.
So in a regular civil action, a breach of contract, for example, if somebody forgets to mention, oh yes, we signed the contract, shame on them, they don't win the case. But in a custody case, if somebody forgets to deal with one of the factors, the judge has a duty to try to look into all of the factors in order to make the proper determination. Right. But let's talk about what other areas of law the Self-Help Center will deal with.
Again, we anticipate custody is going to be the biggest, but we also anticipate a lot of questions or inquiries about divorce proceedings. We have 2 packets for divorce. But again, we're limited in scope in terms of what kind of things we'll do. We won't do complicated custody matters. We'll do no-fault divorce and divorce where there isn't property at stake. We have some minor forms. Name change is one that we're working on developing. We have license suspension appeals.
So driver's license suspension?
Driver's license and registration. And what we have there are the forms to file the appeal. We don't have any forms as to make your case after that. But we can get them started at any rate.
Okay. Now, if I wanted to use the Self-Help Center, do I have to go to your office, or can I look it up online?
We will have a website when we open.
And do you know the name of that website?
www.courtselfhelp.org.
Okay. And so somebody goes to www.courtselfhelp.org. Will they be able to read the information that they would otherwise be able to get at your office?
Yes, we will print it for them if they come in and charge the fee for the printing and the copying, but they can print it if they have access to a computer. They can print it at home for free. We'll have all the forms we have available in our office on that website. In addition, there are other on the York County website, there are a lot of forms. We'll have links to a lot of those on our site as well. But unless there's a great demand, we won't keep them in hard copy in our office.
Okay, but so if somebody is simply at home and they want to look up what they need, they could go to the website and basically print their own forms.
Yes.
And also receive the instructions?
Yes. Yes.
And just look at those or print them, and they do not need to come into the center at all?
They do not. I think that a lot of people will like the face-to-face time and the ability to have it in their hand as they leave. At the same time, if you do have access at home, it makes it a lot easier and cheaper to just take care of it yourself.
I mean, you're only charging a nominal fee for the copy costs, but if they print it themselves, there's no copy costs.
Right.
What about people who show up thinking they should be filing something, but they really just need advice? Are you going to be a referral source for other information as well?
We are. It wasn't our original intention. We really only intended to focus on the legal side, the court side. But I think that it's a disservice to the community if we say we have these resources, we should be able to direct people. So if someone comes in and they think they have a court issue, it's actually not. It could be another issue. We can direct them to various services within the county, within the county system, and you know, other services that can help them, from United Way to our Human Services Department, the Area Agency on Aging, for instance.
And you've been spending much of your time not only preparing these forms and packets, but also making contacts with these other agencies in order to make the proper referrals.
The hope is I'll have a key contact person in each Department of Human Services, as well as at the United Way, and lots of places where if someone comes in, I can either, if I don't know the answer, call this person or refer them to that site or person or actual physical location. And we will have 2 computers in the center available for the public to use, with limited access to the internet, but to those sources that could be resources.
I hate to point this out, but we're out of time right now, and I wish you the best with everything you're doing with the Self-Help Center. It opens October 23rd, and it will also be online at that time.
Yes.
So thank you. This is Legal Lines. I didn't get to do the whole ending because